Good morning, everyone. My name is Raymond Labios, and I'm here to present our findings from our paper entitled Archipelago on Lockdown, an analysis of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on MSMEs across the Philippines agricultural value chain. My co-authors in this paper are Dr. Depositario, Professor Noreen Manipol, Professor Renan de Guzman, and Professor Dia Velasco. Apologies for the flashbacks that this might trigger, but let's start with this question. What happened during the early months of the pandemic? There were drastic shifts in consumer demand. There was panic buying. There was more buying in bulk. People visited shops less, and people became more conscious of what they were buying rather than buying things on impulse. There were also slowdowns and stoppages in the supply side. Our food suppliers struggled to change along with the shifts in consumer behavior. Along with the lockdown protocols put in place, food under deliveries and non-deliveries occurred in some provinces. And, sadly, food wastage became a common occurrence. My co-authors and I wrote this paper back in June, and with so much going on, we asked ourselves how we could best analyze the situation and, in a way, develop some recommendations for the benefit of our agricultural MSMEs. Given also the fact that we were about to scrutinize an unfamiliar situation of this scale. So we started with resilience, specifically agricultural value chain resilience. In their 2018 paper, Brogan-Dewey and Hodbod defined agricultural value chain resilience as the capacity of a value chain to continue and develop in the provision of food security and other services in the face of disturbances, through the preparation for, response to, and recovery from unexpected shocks, the avoidance of tipping points, and the adaptation to ongoing change. The authors visualize the food system as this interconnection of system components, or stocks of resources and capabilities used by farms and firms to produce and trade. The arrows that you see here represent governing institutions, the horizontal and vertical structures used to govern the use and flow of resources and coordinate activities across the value chain. Of course, our agricultural value chain would not be complete without the disturbances that these elements are exposed to. These disturbances can occur in the form of stressors or disturbances that have a gradual impact, such as privatization and global investment, or those disturbances can occur in the form of shocks, such as droughts, the all too familiar typhoon. Personally, I would classify this pandemic as a stressor, as we are still pretty uncertain as to how long this will last and how deep its effects would have on society and the economy. So, how might we enhance the resilience of these system components? Some examples are maintaining diversity and redundancy, and managing connectivity. For our governing institutions, their resilience can be enhanced by efforts such as fostering complex adaptive systems thinking and broadening participation across stakeholders. Now let's look at how our agri-MSMEs across the value chain were affected in the early half of the year by the pandemic. For the input and service provision subsystem, we have here a few examples. For fertilizers and pesticides, costs went up as available supply went down. For animal feeds and veterinary products, there have been increased delays and reduced supplies. Access to seeds and breeder stocks went down. And the same goes for access to public and advisory services that our farmers typically used before the pandemic. These effects were attributed to production stoppages in countries from where we import our supplies. As an example, China is a major source of phosphate for the Philippines, and manufacturing plants and ports had to be shut down in China during those early days. Importers also struggled to get import permits, phytosanitary certificates, and customs clearances. And for some drivers, carrying rice, corn, and other vegetable seeds, they were told to turn back to their points of origin. Lockdown protocols also prevented our farmers from receiving advisory and other services. Let's move on to the production system. It is quite unfortunate that the lockdowns coincided with the productive months of our fruits and vegetables. In Benguet and Tarlac, for example, the oversupply of vegetables led to loss of income and food wastage for our farmers. Not only that, mobility restrictions prevented farmers from leaving their homes for work. Meanwhile, in the fisheries and aquaculture sector, they experienced losses from spoilage. This was due to the reduced access to ice plants resulting from closures. Long checkpoint lines also contributed to the spoilage. Now, onto the processing subsystem. Because also of quarantine protocols, there was reduced access to processing plants. For workers in processing plants, there have been reports of reduced worker efficiency due to sanitary and social distancing protocols that had to be implemented. Also, processing plants had to increase holding stock due to the fewer available storage facilities, as well as shifts in product demand. Up next, we have the transport and storage subsystem. There have been reports of unclaimed food cargo containers due again to transport restrictions and limited mobility of personnel. Some transporters of food packaging materials were also stopped for being considered non essential when they reached certain checkpoints. Some of our farmers from Ifugao and Nueva Vizcaya had no choice but to dump and abandon their tomatoes by the roadside due to strict lockdown protocols. Moving on to the retailing subsystem, there are reports where retailers in wet markets in Manila were only given fixed hours during the day to buy from wholesalers. Those retailers also were allowed to only open shop during a limited period each day and during certain days of the week only. There also were reports where retailers experienced payment issues, particularly a rise in requests for paying in installments rather than in full upfront. Some smallholder farmers were also left with no choice but to sell at reduced prices. This in turn led to lower incomes and lower purchasing power. On the consumption side, consumers were no longer able to visit food establishments and food stalls due to the lockdown. While more and more consumers began eating at home or ordering from restaurants that have found ways to survive despite the reduced foot traffic, there has also been an increase in e commerce activity amongst consumers. Let's now focus on our governing institutions, or the arrows in the figure shown earlier. Institutions such as the Bureau of Plant Industry and the Rice Competitive Enhancement Fund doled out free seeds to help the input subsystem of the value chain. There also has been a drive spearheaded by the Department of Agriculture for consumers to grow their own produce in their households. There has also been a growth in online instructional services provided by the DA, DTI, and NEDA to help enhance the skills of agri-MSMEs business owners and employees. As an example, DTI and Go Negosyo partnered up to develop an end-to-end mentoring program, beginning from business conception to operations. The Kadiwa program of the DA has also stepped up its efforts. Kadiwa stands for Katuwang sa Diwa at Gawa para sa masaganang ani at mataas na kita, and the program directly connects farmers with consumers through Market on Wheels efforts and online platforms. The program helps shorten the food supply chain, thereby allowing customers to enjoy lower prices and farmers to reap higher profits. Loans were also made available by various agencies. As an example, we have CARES, or the COVID-19 Assistance to Restart Enterprise by SB Corp and DTI. There's also Kaya, or Capital Access for Young Entrepreneurs, spearheaded by the DA targeting startup agripreneurs. The Land Bank of the Philippines also has iRescue, or Interim Rehabilitation Support to cushion unfavorably affected enterprises by COVID-19. It helps MSMEs, microfinance institutions, and cooperatives. In writing our report, One key takeaway that we have found was that our agricultural value chain is truly a diverse and complex system. And this complex system lives across this archipelago of regions and islands that are also inherently diverse. As tempting as it may sound to analyze our agri value chain from a singular lens, doing so is highly inadvisable. With the impacts that our team has observed, we came up with a few recommendations that could help enhance the agri value chain of the Philippines. First, we recommend that we involve our farmers more so in the development of new policies if we are to modernize our food system. Second, we recommend that marketing efforts be intensified to promote the use of digital trade platforms. This helps in making our social distancing protocols and lockdowns more bearable for our MSMEs. And with that, an effort to not only accelerate data collection, but finding out the benefits that we could reap from the data gathered in these digital trading platforms. Somebody said that data is the new oil, and it would be a complete disservice to ourselves if this is an area that we do not pursue. Third, we recommend that efforts be strengthened in modernizing our logistics and transport infrastructure. There are reports out there that say we rank poorly versus our Asian neighbors in this regard. Fourth, we recommend that trade policies be reviewed, with special attention paid to how to respond when we have a global disruptive event like this pandemic. Fifth, we recommend skills development to help our MSMEs become better in adapting to disruptive events. Sixth, we recommend enhancing financial literacy for our agricultural communities, on top of the financial services that are currently provided and may be developed in the future. Lastly, we recommend the adoption of an adaptive systems thinking that fosters innovation and uses integrative agribusiness models. One thing that we should be careful about in planning and implementing these potential upgrades are the effects that they may cause on our agri value chain as a whole. Again, this is part of adaptive systems thinking. And when thinking about resilience in managing this complex food system of ours, we should also be asking ourselves about measuring resilience, or if it is indeed possible. Is there a way for us to determine levels of resilience so that we can better adjust to disruptions, whether they are momentary shocks or more long term gradual disruptions? In conclusion, helping our MSMEs mitigate the impacts of events such as this pandemic requires structural improvements across the agri value chain. And in coming up with solutions, we have to begin with our farmers, involving them as co creators of the pathways to an improved food system. And while we reach out to our stakeholders, let us also keep in mind the pandemic. Our stakeholders may be dealing with things that are more important to them than the long term resilience efforts we might be thinking about. And let us remember that there is a difference between having survived the pandemic right now versus already emerging from the pandemic, signs of which we are still waiting to see. That ends my presentation. Thank you very much.
From Emilio Neri Jr., what digital solutions are proposed to address value chain issues?
I guess this question's for me.
Yeah.
The interesting thing that happened over the past several months was the emergence of those digital tools that already have been in development. So I guess they have been accelerated because of the need for them. So for one, there is the e version of Kadiwa. So you have eKadiwa where there's this online platform where the DA is connecting farmers directly to consumers. And then also you have the supply chain analytics tool that NEDA helped develop. It allows logistics companies to report out there in the field if they encounter whatever logistical issues. It may be some border, we call this checkpoints, and you could report that, and everyone has who is on that platform has access to these information updates. However, it's not known or publicly not available, the data that they have collected thus far on that platform. So yes, definitely one recommendation would be to maybe add more of these digital tools, especially in terms of figuring out how our supply chain and logistics sector is performing under these strains that we currently have. And yes, with those different platforms that are being used for connecting our producers with the consumers. So yeah, there's a challenge there on bringing all of these information together to see what trends have emerged over the past several months while more customers have been using these platforms.
Thank you, Professor Labios.